Today, we're diving into a really cool business mystery. We're going to follow a team of data detectives as they race against the clock to save a huge hotel chain, Atliq Grands, from a pretty serious financial nosedive. All right, let's get into it. So first, you gotta understand who we're talking about. Atliq Grands is not just some random hotel chain. Nope, they've spent 20 years building this incredible reputation for luxury. Think stunning properties, top-notch business hotels, all across major Indian cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. They're basically a household name for luxury in the Indian hospitality world. But here's the twist. Despite that amazing reputation, the company is in big trouble. We're talking a steady, scary drop in revenue, and they're losing ground to their competitors. You can bet the alarm bells were going off in the boardroom. They needed answers, and they needed them yesterday. Now, to really get what's going on, you have to look at the numbers the hotel industry basically lives and dies by. Things like occupancy, that's just how many rooms are full, and the average daily rate, or ADR, which is the average price people are paying per room. But the really critical clue for our story, it's something called the revenue realization rate. It sounds complicated, but it's just a fancy way of asking a simple question. Of all the bookings people make, how many actually show up and pay? And, well, this is where our mystery really kicks off. So, to solve this whole mess, the leadership team made a really smart call. They decided to stop relying on gut feelings and old habits. Instead, they decided to become data detectives. They were totally convinced that the clues they needed to survive were hiding right there, inside their own booking records. But as any good detective will tell you, the evidence is almost never clean. The team's first big problem wasn't figuring out the mystery, it was just dealing with the messy, real-world data. They found booking records for more guests than a hotel could physically hold, and these wild revenue numbers that were obviously errors, plus tons and tons of missing info. It was a mess. So, step one was just a massive cleanup operation. They had to sanitize everything. That meant filtering out those crazy revenue numbers, getting rid of the impossible bookings, and clearing out all the duplicate entries that came from system glitches. They had to do all of that before they could even begin to trust what the data was trying to tell them. Okay, now for the fun part, the investigation itself. With clean data finally in hand, our detectives started digging for patterns. And what they found was, well, it was both surprising and really, really concerning. So the first clue actually looked like great news. This chart here shows that Mumbai is the company's absolute cash cow. It's pulling in over $400 million in revenue, way more than any other city. So at first glance, you'd think, wow, Mumbai is crushing it. But that huge number was actually hiding a really serious problem, which brings us to our next clue. And here is that problem, hiding right in plain sight. Clue number 2. A frankly shocking 24.8% average cancellation rate. Just think about that for a second. 1 out of every 4 bookings just disappears. And this wasn't just on one platform. It was a consistent problem across every single way a person could book a room. This slide tells us exactly why those cancellations are happening. A massive chunk of their bookings comes from third-party platforms. Now, these sites are great for getting lots of eyeballs, but they have the highest cancellation rates, and on top of that, they charge high commissions that just eat away at the profits. Meanwhile, their best, most reliable customers, the ones who book directly with the hotel, they only make up a tiny little slice of the pie. And then there's the third major clue. Look at this, their pricing power. The average daily rate, what they charge per room, is almost completely flat. There's basically no difference in price between a Tuesday and a Saturday night. They are leaving an incredible amount of money on the table by not using dynamic pricing to charge more when demand is obviously at its highest. So, with these big clues, these super high cancellations, relying too much on iffy booking sites, and that totally flat pricing, our data detectives were getting really close. They were ready to pinpoint the exact source of all this financial bleeding. It all boiled down to one single critical question. The big picture trends are helpful, sure, but to stop the bleeding, you need to know exactly where the wound is. Which specific properties were leaking the most cash? And there it is, the smoking gun. This chart is basically a critical alert, showing the top 5 hotels by revenue leakage. It turns out the problem wasn't spread out evenly at all. Just a few key locations, mostly in that super competitive Mumbai market, were responsible for a huge, disproportionate amount of the loss. And to really put a number on it, just look at the single worst offender. The Atliq Exotica in Mumbai. all by itself, lost almost 36 million Indian rupees just from cancellations and no-shows. That is a mind-boggling amount of money just leaking out of one single property. So, with the culprits identified and all the evidence laid out, the mystery was solved. But, an insight is totally useless without action. The great part was now the team could build a super targeted, data-driven plan to actually fix the problem. And here's that plan. 4 simple, actionable steps that came directly from the investigation. First, go after that massive revenue leak that's concentrated in Mumbai. Second, figure out the specific issues in Bangalore, which has the lowest occupancy. Third, launch a real campaign to get more of those high-value direct bookings. And finally, for goodness sake, implement a dynamic pricing strategy to make more money on those busy weekends. They went from total chaos to total clarity, all thanks to following the data. The story of Atliq Grands really shows us that sometimes the answers to our biggest problems are hiding right there in plain sight. It just takes asking the right questions and having the courage to follow where the data leads. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. What story is your data just waiting to tell?